The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the bustling streets of downtown. Horns blared from impatient drivers while pedestrians navigated the crowded sidewalks, each lost in their own world. Street vendors shouted their daily specials, and the aroma of street food wafted through the air, creating a surreal backdrop for what was about to unfold. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as a commotion erupted near a small park that a group of officers had cornered an elderly woman, frail yet defiant, struggling against the grip of two imposing figures in uniform. Her silver hair glinted in the sunlight as she clutched a tattered purse close to her chest, her wide eyes reflecting both fear and indignation. The scene drew the attention of passers-by, who began to gather, their curiosity turning to concern as they witnessed the spectacle. "Leave her alone," shouted a young man in the crowd, his voice cutting through the haze of confusion. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as the officers responded with brusque commands, their patience wearing thin. The tension escalated palpably. Shouts filled the air, mingling with the anxious murmurs of bystanders questioning what might transpire next. The confrontation took on a life of its own as more officers arrived, their presence transforming the situation into a chaotic tableau. The elderly woman's protests grew louder. Her voice trembled with indignation as she attempted to explain herself, but her words were drowned out by the escalating shouts of authority. The scene was stark, a symbol of power clashing with vulnerability, leaving everyone caught in a moral quagmire. Just then, from the periphery of the growing crowd, a familiar figure emerged, Jason Statham, known for his roles as an action hero, yet often lauded for his real-life compassion. Having just finished a meeting across town, he rushed towards the chaos, alarm bells ringing in his mind. As he neared the gathering, determination set on his face, he prepared to confront not just the officers, but also a system that had seemingly forgotten its purpose to protect and serve. As the crowd buzzed with anxiety, the elderly woman at the center of the chaos had a life story woven into the very fabric of the community. Her name was Agnes Miller, a 75-year-old widow who had lived in the same neighborhood for decades. Known affectionately as Granny Aggie by local children, she had become a beloved figure, often seen tending her small garden or handing out homemade cookies to anyone who stopped by. Agnes was not just a sweet old woman. She was a pillar of resilience. Having lost her husband to illness years ago, she had navigated life's challenges with grace and tenacity. She spent countless hours volunteering at the local food bank and organizing community events, a testament to her belief in helping others. Her spirit resonated deeply with those around her, creating bonds that transcended generations. On that fateful day, Agnes had been on her way to deliver knitted hats and scarves to a local shelter when misfortune struck. She carried her tattered purse, an heirloom from her late husband, which contained not just money but also cherished memories. While crossing the street, she inadvertently wandered into an area where some teenagers were loitering, drawing unwanted attention. The police had received reports of disturbances nearby and mistook Agnes for someone involved in the chaos. As officers approached, instead of recognizing her frailty and vulnerability, they acted swiftly and aggressively, cornering her without giving her a chance to explain herself. Feeling threatened and confused, Agnes stood her ground against their demands. Her heart raced as she tried to articulate that she posed no danger. All she wanted was to help those less fortunate than herself. But in that moment of confusion and fear, everything spiraled out of control. Her dignity challenged by authority figures meant to protect her. Little did she know that just moments away was Jason Statham, ready to step in for someone who embodied courage and kindness in an increasingly harsh world. As tensions peaked, the officer's demeanor shifted from authoritative to aggressive. What began as a misunderstanding swiftly devolved into a scene of chaos that left onlookers horrified. Agnes, trembling yet resolute, found herself pinned against the cold brick wall, her frailty contrasting sharply with the officer's muscular forms. "Let me go," she cried, her voice trembling in both fear and defiance. But her pleas were drowned out by the harsh bark of commands and the shuffle of boots on pavement. One officer stepped forward, his expression hardened with determination. "You're under suspicion. Get on the ground," he shouted, pushing her down with more force than necessary. Agnes stumbled, her knees hitting the unforgiving ground, and gasps echoed from the gathered crowd. Spectators recoiled in shock. Anger flashed across their faces as they witnessed an elderly woman being treated like a criminal. "Stop! She's just an old lady," a bystander shouted, stepping closer in protest. The crowd began to murmur in agitation. Outrage rippled through them like a rising tide. Phones emerged from pockets and bags as people documented the unfolding drama, hoping that evidence would temper this misuse of power when it reached the public eye. The officers, undeterred by the mounting voices of dissent, continued their heavy-handed approach. Agnes's tattered purse slipped from her grasp, its contents spilling onto the pavement. A half-finished scarf and some change rolling away into the street. It was a moment that vividly illustrated her vulnerability and added fuel to the fire of public outrage. With each passing second, as Agnes struggled against them with whatever strength remained, shouts of disapproval grew louder among the witnesses. "This is wrong," another voice echoed, galvanizing others to join in solidarity against what seemed like blatant abuse. Just as tension threatened to erupt into chaos, a familiar figure emerged from the periphery. Jason Statham, exuding both confidence and concern, he had arrived just in time to witness the scene unfold, ready to challenge not just the actions of a few officers, but an entire system that had lost sight of its purpose: to serve and protect everyone, especially those most vulnerable. Jason Statham had just emerged from a nearby cafe, his demeanor reflecting the calm confidence that had made him a household name. Dressed in a fitted black jacket and jeans, he blended into the urban landscape, yet there was an undeniable intensity in his stance. With sharp blue eyes taking in the vibrant chaos around him, he was just another passerby, until the cries of protest rang out, pulling him toward the unfolding scene. As he approached, Statham's heart raced with concern. He was no stranger to conflict, having spent years portraying tough characters on screen that often navigated moral dilemmas. But this wasn't a scripted scenario. It was real life, where courage and quick thinking were paramount. The sight of an elderly woman being manhandled by officers ignited a fire within him, prompting instinctive action. Bravery coursed through his veins as he assessed the situation within moments. The shouts from onlookers only fueled his determination. He could feel the palpable tension hanging in the air, that he noticed how Agnes struggled against her captors, her frailty making their aggressive tactics all the more appalling. In that instant, Statham understood that he could not stand idly by. With purposeful strides, he moved toward the chaotic fray, his presence commanding attention even before he spoke. Those gathered began to notice him, some faces lighting up with recognition, while others mirrored a hope for intervention. His reputation preceded him. Not only was he an action star known for physical prowess, but also a man who stood up for justice when it mattered most. "Hey, what's going on here?" Jason called out as he approached, his voice steady and authoritative. He focused on the officers while keeping his gaze keenly aware of Agnes's plight. The bravery that defined his film roles now translated into an authentic desire to protect someone who clearly needed help, acting both as a shield and a voice for those who felt powerless against injustice. In that moment of urgency, Jason Statham became more than just a bystander. He was ready to become a force for good in an increasingly troubling situation. As Jason Statham drew nearer to the unfolding chaos, a whirlwind of emotion spun through him. He had always prided himself on being someone who acted decisively, especially in morally gray situations. Yet the sight of an elderly woman caught in distress ignited a more profound internal conflict within him. His instincts flared. Adrenaline coursed through his body, urging him forward. But deep down, there was a flicker of doubt. He had played many roles where he faced formidable foes in fictional worlds, but this was different. These were real officers of the law, and stepping into this tumult could have consequences far beyond his control. What if it fueled the situation further? What if he became the target instead? But as Agnes's frail figure struggled against the overwhelming force of authority, that flicker transformed into a blazing conviction that Statham's moral compass guided him. It was not just about physical confrontation. It was about justice and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. He had witnessed her vulnerability firsthand, and with each cry for help that escaped Agnes's lips, every anguished shout from the growing crowd intensified his resolve. The thought of standing by while she faced such indignity was unbearable. His heart raced as he recalled moments in his life where he had chosen to stand up for what's right over personal safety. His friends often teased him about being too much of a hero, but deep down he knew that's who he was, a defender for those without a voice. Turning away now felt like betraying everything he believed in. With a steadying breath, Statham pushed aside any lingering fears and made his choice clear. He wanted to be more than an observer. He would intervene, not as a celebrity, but as a man committed to justice. Whatever happened next, he would not let Agnes endure this alone. That he stepped forward into the fray with purpose etched across his features. A warrior ready to challenge injustice and lend strength where it was most needed. With determination in his stride, Jason Statham stepped into the fray, his presence immediately commanding attention. The murmurs of the crowd faded as he approached the group of officers, his sharp blue eyes locking onto theirs with an intensity that demanded respect. "What's happening here?" he called out, his voice steady yet laced with authority. The officers momentarily paused, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of a well-known figure. Statham's reputation as both an action star and an advocate for justice preceded him, and he knew how to use that to his advantage. He stood tall, exuding confidence and calmness in the face of rising tension. "Back off," one officer barked, attempting to reassert dominance over the situation. But Statham remained undeterred, stepping closer, his gaze unwavering. "You're using excessive force on an elderly woman," he stated firmly, gesturing toward Agnes, who was still struggling against her captors. "She's not a criminal. She's a community member who deserves your respect." The crowd began to murmur again, their support for Statham growing as they recognized a potential ally in him. Statham continued, his charisma cutting through the taut atmosphere like a knife. "This isn't right," he insisted, directing his words at both the officers and the bystanders. "We all know what it means to stand up for someone who can't defend themselves. That's what you're supposed to do." The officers shifted uncomfortably, caught between their training and the mounting pressure from the public and Statham alike. He utilized his physicality to create a barrier between Agnes and the officers, standing as a protective shield against further aggression. "I'm not here to escalate things," he said calmly, but firmly. "I'm here to ensure she gets treated with dignity." His voice rang out with conviction, embodying not just bravado, but genuine concern for the vulnerable woman behind him. With each word, Statham wove a narrative of justice and compassion that resonated deeply with those watching. The power dynamics began to shift. Doubt crept into the minds of the officers as they weighed their next move against the formidable presence of Statham and the collective anger of a community unwilling to tolerate injustice any longer. Jason Statham stood firm in front of the officers. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. Onlookers, initially shocked and uncertain, began to rally behind him, their murmurs turning into chants of support. "Let her go," some shouted, while others whipped out their phones to document the unfolding confrontation, eager to capture the moment when one man stood up against perceived injustice. Excitement rippled through the crowd as people began to cheer for Statham, recognizing him not just as a Hollywood star, but as a defender of the vulnerable. "This is what we need," a young woman exclaimed, her voice rising above the din. Faces in the crowd lit up with hope, and a sense of unity emerged as they realized they were witnessing a turning point. Some participants in the scene recorded every moment, not just for social media, but to ensure that this event would not go unnoticed. Amidst this newfound solidarity, several bystanders began to shout their agreement with Statham's words. "She's just an old lady. She deserves respect." Another voice chimed in from the back. The palpable swell of public opinion shifted from passive observation to active participation. People felt emboldened to express their discontent with the heavy-handed tactics being used against Agnes. The officers, once so confident in their authority, now found themselves increasingly isolated. The growing chorus of voices criticizing their actions worked like a wave washing over them, eroding their earlier resolve that a few police officers exchanged. Uneasy glances, clearly rattled by the shift in sentiment. Statham maintained his composure. Recognizing that every word and action mattered in this pivotal moment, he gestured toward Agnes, reminding those around them of her humanity. She deserves compassion. His voice rang clear and resonant amid the cheers and chants that in this charged environment where public opinion was rapidly evolving. Every cheer for Statham and every protest against the police further weakened their position. It became evident that together they could challenge authority when it drifted into unjust territories, as the tension between the officers and the crowd escalated. Statham stood at the forefront of a collective voice calling for justice, ready to fight not just for Agnes, but for anyone who had ever felt marginalized or powerless. That in the aftermath of the confrontation, the impact of Jason Statham's intervention rippled through the community and beyond. News outlets quickly picked up the story, broadcasting footage of the incident and Statham's resolute stand against police aggression. Headlines like "Action Star Defends Elderly Woman from Police Brutality" began circulating, drawing national attention to the event. Social media erupted with support for Statham, as well as calls for accountability regarding the officer's actions. Within hours, local activists organized a demonstration in support of Agnes, demanding justice and pushing for a review of police conduct. Flyers circulated throughout the neighborhood, emphasizing the need for reform and compassion in law enforcement. The public's outrage over the incident not only spotlighted Agnes' plight, but also brought scrutiny to the police department's practices, which had long been criticized for their heavy-handed tactics. The officers involved soon found themselves facing potential departmental investigations. Internal Affairs began looking into their actions that day, reviewing body camera footage and eyewitness accounts. As public pressure mounted, the police chief issued a statement promising a thorough investigation, recognizing that maintaining community trust was paramount. For Statham, this moment transformed him from a mere bystander into a symbol of courage and advocacy. He received messages of thanks from community members and activists alike, applauding his bravery. However, he also faced backlash from some who believe he should have remained uninvolved in law enforcement matters. Still, he stood firm in his beliefs, stating in interviews that he would always act to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the situation unfolded, it became clear that Statham's actions were more than just a spontaneous response. They catalyzed a conversation about justice and accountability that reached far beyond that single incident. The events of that day had sparked a movement, a call for change resonating through the streets, reminding everyone that standing up against injustice was not just an act of bravery, but a civic duty. As news of the confrontation spread, media outlets quickly seized on the story, framing Jason Statham as a hero for his decisive action. Television networks broadcast the raw footage of the incident, highlighting his confrontation with the officers and his passionate defense of Agnes. Headlines like "Hollywood Star Takes a Stand Against Police Aggression" and "Statham Becomes Voice for the Voiceless" dominated the news cycle, capturing the public's imagination and sparking intense discussion across social media platforms. Interviews with bystanders amplified the narrative, with many praising Statham's courage in standing up against what they perceived as police brutality. Reporters detailed how he had transformed from an everyday citizen to a symbol of activism, encouraging people to reflect on their roles in confronting injustice. The story also initiated broader conversations about police conduct, particularly regarding vulnerable populations, prompting several news shows to feature debates among law enforcement experts, community leaders, and civil rights advocates. As clips of Statham's intervention went viral, various organizations advocating for social justice rallied around the cause. They pushed for increased scrutiny on police methods and called for reforms that would prioritize de-escalation tactics and respect for individuals' rights. Prominent activists highlighted how such incidents often go unnoticed without someone brave enough to intervene. The police department faced mounting pressure to respond transparently, in light of public scrutiny. They issued statements claiming they were committed to reviewing their protocols and ensuring proper training on handling vulnerable citizens in similar situations. However, many in the community viewed this as inadequate without tangible change. Davidson, a well-known figure in law enforcement reform movements, appeared on television to discuss how Statham's actions had opened a vital dialogue that was long overdue. It takes a moment like this, a catalyst, to reignite the conversation about respect and responsibility in policing, he stated passionately. With every broadcast and article reinforcing Statham's heroism, it became clear that this incident was no longer just about a single encounter. It had evolved into a pivotal moment for public discourse surrounding justice, accountability, and compassion within society. Statham's brave stance resonated widely as a call to action for individuals everywhere to stand up against injustice whenever they witnessed it. In the days following the incident, the local community rallied around Agnes Miller, united in their desire for justice and reform. Neighborhood meetings sprang up, filled with passionate discussions about police accountability and the treatment of vulnerable citizens. Residents expressed their gratitude for Jason Statham's heroic actions and recognized him not just as a celebrity, but as a champion for their cause. Community leaders organized a peaceful demonstration, inviting everyone to join in support of Agnes and to demand changes in policing practices. Signs were made bearing messages like "Justice for Agnes" and "Respect our elders," which spoke to both the specific incident and broader issues of civil rights. The atmosphere was charged with hope and determination as people from all walks of life came together, some bringing food to share, while others brought children to teach them about standing up for what is right. On the day of the rally, the streets were alive with energy as participants gathered in front of City Hall. Local news crews arrived, eager to capture the moment as activists took to microphones to share powerful stories about encounters with law enforcement. Agnes, although still shaken, emerged as an unexpected symbol of resilience. Her presence reminded everyone that real lives were at stake in these discussions. Statham himself sent a message of support through social media, urging people to continue advocating for justice and compassion within their communities. His endorsement only fueled the fire, encouraging more individuals to join the movement. Many thanked him publicly for his bravery and reiterated that his actions had inspired them to speak out against injustice. Conversations surrounding police reform gained traction. Local representatives began addressing the need for policy changes during town hall meetings. Advocates pushed for training programs focused on empathy and de-escalation techniques for police officers, emphasizing that community safety should never come at the expense of individual dignity. Through it all, Agnes became a beloved figure within the community. She was no longer just a victim, but a catalyst for change. The solidarity displayed during this critical time highlighted the power of collective action and served as a reminder that together they could challenge systemic issues head-on, transforming fear into courage and prompting important dialogues about respect, justice, and humanity. The incident involving Jason Statham, Agnes Miller, and the police serves as a poignant reminder of the deep-seated issues surrounding authority, vulnerability, and community solidarity. In moments of chaos and injustice, it becomes clear that courage can manifest in unexpected ways. Statham's decision to intervene was not merely an act of heroism. It sparked a broader dialogue about the responsibilities we all share in standing against injustices faced by our neighbors. Communities rallied around Agnes. Their collective response illustrated the power of unity in challenging authority. This incident transcended individual actions and became a catalyst for change, emphasizing that when one person stands up for what is right, it encourages others to do the same. The energy generated from this confrontation reverberated throughout the streets, igniting passion and purpose where fear had previously lingered. In reflecting on the community's journey, it's evident that true justice requires more than just isolated incidents of bravery. It necessitates ongoing conversations about respect, and empathy in our interactions with one another, especially regarding those who are vulnerable. The dynamic between citizens and law enforcement needs continual examination to ensure that dignity is upheld for every individual. Moreover, the aftermath showcases the vital role individuals can play in inspiring social movements. The story serves as a reminder that when someone stands up for another, they can ignite hope and motivate collective action. Change often begins with one courageous act, a sentiment embodied by Statham's actions that day. Looking ahead, it is paramount for communities to embrace this narrative of courage and compassion as they continue advocating for justice and reform. Why standing together and amplifying voices often marginalized or silenced. They can work towards building a society where all individuals feel safe and respected. Ultimately, this incident has not only highlighted areas in need of reform, but also reaffirmed faith in humanity's capacity to foster positive change through solidarity and shared values of justice, reminding us all that even one person's bravery can light the way for many.